welcome to Radiant Guidance. Today I'm going to be discussing Mars opposite Pluto in the natal chart. So this is if you have the planets Mars and Pluto in an opposition or 180-degree angle. And I'll first talk about what these planets represent to better understand how this aspect manifests. Oppositions are, of course, complementary, right? They can be. And when we harness these aspects in the most evolved way, we can really have them working together because they're really the opposite of the same polarity. So they're two sides of the same coin, you could say. However, they can also, especially when it's challenging planets like Mars and Pluto, represent confrontation, difficulty, and challenge. And so in the examples I will give, we will see how this very eruptive, volatile aspect can manifest in the lives of people, and also how it can also be channeled for great tenacity, strength, and determination. So the planet Mars is our individual drive. It is what ignites us. It's our fuel, you could say, and how we want to go out and get things. And so it's a really key part of our motivation. Pluto represents the shadowy depths and resources of the underworld. Now, Pluto, as you probably know, was the god who abducted Persephone. She was a beautiful young maiden. He basically abducted her, and that's where we actually get the winter season from. And it represents the shadowy parts of the collective that we prefer not to really look at or just kind of brush under the rug. Pluto represents the depths, the ore, the minerals deep within the earth, the riches that people will go to great lengths to behold. So we can think of things like coal and the fact that this was a resource that people had children, going into trenches and will risk their lives to get. We can also think of like very fine crystals in some parts of the world. There's child labor. Fracking, for instance, how people will destroy Mother Earth to get oil. And the list kind of goes on of these treasures that almost no bounds to obtain. And people will do pretty sinister things for and deny morality for. So it can be seen then when we have Mars opposite Pluto that this is a very strong signature for abuse. This can be a very strong signature of a person's will and sense of autonomy, personal power being blocked or challenged by a larger evil force. And so one of the best known examples of this aspect playing out was JonBenet Ramsey. She actually had this aspect exact in her chart, and she is really a modern Persephone myth. She was abducted. She was a beauty pageant queen, so she obviously had a lot of tenacity, drive. At this very young age, was probably pressured, of course, through her family to perform, to be the best. And she was unfortunately kidnapped, abducted, and it was an unsolved case. And it just left this kind of dark imagination in the collective of what happened to her. Was she sexually abused, etc., etc. This aspect can be an indicator for sexual abuse. Trigger warning, it is an aspect that is really common in people who have faced some sort of challenge to that, because these two planets are very sexual in their nature. Mars represents the male sex reproductive organs, also adrenaline. Pluto is death and transformation. It's in its higher octave, a catalyst for alchemy, a catalyst for coming out of a dark night of the soul, to be reborn, to be renewed. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it certainly does represent, like I said, those shadowy drives and impulses. Another example of an individual who has this or had this aspect is Bruce Lee. So Bruce Lee was a very talented martial artist, also an actor, performer, And he overcame a lot of obstacles in his younger life. He was actually bullied, and this was part of what compelled him to develop that grit and developed the ability to fight and and have this sense of self-mastery. And he was also born to a father who was abusive to him as well. I think his dad was an alcoholic, and so he didn't have an easy upbringing. He had to overcome obstacles with his sense of will, and his sense of personal power. Ultimately, he has a lot of very inspirational quotes. He has a very inspirational life, and I actually think he was murdered, if I do remember correctly. And it's not to say everyone with this aspect will be murdered, but it's definitely an aspect that can show violence that one might experience. And I liken it to a volcano. So Jung's famous quote is that which we do not internalize will present externally as fate. And so to really alchemize this aspect, one is getting in touch with the repressed anger or the repressed rage. Because with Pluto confronting your Mars in an opposition, there could be a lot of anger and rage that was like pushed under, because from a young age you were basically forced to repress it. And what can happen then is it can just explode randomly. And like a volcano, I think of the Mars as like the gases of a volcano and the Pluto as the magma that is being thrust from the surface, right? The volcano can erupt very explosively, but a volcano can also slowly siphon and release its power in a more contained, controlled manner. And so Bruce Lee would represent someone who mastered this containment of the power and the channeling of the rage in a way that really served him. And so, an invitation with this aspect is choosing how do you deal with your anger and how can you channel your power and harness your power in a way that really benefits you. Hope this was helpful. If you guys want full chart readings, I offer that. My website is radiantguidance.com. Thank you. If you liked this, please subscribe to the channel, comment below if you have any thoughts, and of course, like the video.